Kwe, bonjour, and hello, everybody. Welcome and bienvenue to a conversation with Janet Rogers or Janet Marie Rogers, depending on who you're asking on a given day. I'm delighted to be chatting with you this afternoon, Janet, and to be hearing some of your work. And thank you all for being here. Just to let you know, we will be leaving a few minutes for questions from the audience at the end. So if you have anything that you'd like to ask, hold it there and we will come to you, I promise. I'm going to introduce Janet in just a minute so you can hear about a long and beautiful career that continues. But before, just to say that this activity is offered with the Maison de la littérature as part of the 10th Salon du livre des Premières Nations, presented by Innergex Renewable Energy, Hydro-Québec, and the Caisse Desjardins de Wendake, OKT Law, and CN. Produced by Kwahiatonhk with exclamation mark, which always makes me want to sort of punch my hand in the air in triumph. The 2021 edition is made possible through the financial support of the Canada Council of the Arts, the Government of Canada, and the Gouvernement de Québec. Official things out of the way, duty done. So, Janet Marie Rogers, sit back, it's a long bio. Janet Rogers is a Mohawk Tuscarora writer from Six Nations of the Grand River. She was born in Vancouver, British Columbia in 1963 and raised in southern Ontario. Janet travelled throughout 2017 to 2019, working within numerous residencies in Victoria, BC, Santa Fe, New Mexico, and Edmonton, Alberta. Janet is based on the Six Nations territory of the Grand River, where she operates the Ojistoh Publishing label. Janet works in page poetry, spoken word performance poetry, video poetry, and recorded poetry with music. She is also a radio broadcaster, documentary producer, and media and sound artist. Her literary titles include Splitting the Heart from Ecstasis Editions in 2007, Red Erotic with Ojistoh Publishing in 2010, Unearthed Leaf Press in 2011, Peace in Duress, Talon Books 2014, and Totem Poles and Railroads, ARP Books 2016. As Long as the Sun Shines, English edition, Bookland Press 2018, with a Mohawk language edition released in 2019. Ego of a Nation is Janet's 7th poetry title, which she independently produced on the Ojistoh Publishing label in 2020. And that's what I'm going to invite her to read from for the next while. Janet, over to you.
Cool. Oh, very cool. I want to say Sego Skanaga. And Skanaga is a Mohawk word, and its meaning, the phrase is like, it's asking you if you have peace. Where you come from, is there peace? And so right away, when we say Sego, hello, Sego Skanaga, I'm asking you to tell a story about where you have been. Where have you just come from? Where have you traveled in from? And so right away, this is like, it's the invitation to share a story. So Skanaga, do you have peace? And can you say, do you have peace? Is there peace where you come from? So basically that's what we're asking. I say Yanyats Degawalagwa, and this is the name. Degawalagwa is the name of Sky Woman's daughter. And I'm adopting this name. It's not official, but I'm adopting it because it feels so right. And when I found this name, it means like a little breath, like a breeze, and like when we speak, we're creating breath with our voice and with our words and our songs. So and we are all Sky Woman's children in accordance with the origin story, Haudenosaunee origin story. So this is something that I kind of ground myself in. I stay rooted in as a writer and a storyteller and a person who produces stories in media, with media. And I don't know if that's what you asked me, but that's what I'm going to carry on with today. And this is my very first time at this festival, and I really want to say a big congratulations to everybody, the team that hosts this festival, because it's 10 years. It takes a lot of work to put a festival like this together, and with featuring Indigenous writers, because the sense I'm getting within this territory is that the Indigenous writers are just now coming up, and this is really exciting. This is really exciting. as a writer and as a person who works in media, I never think that the circle is closed. The circle is so big, and the circle has plenty of room for everyone's voice in there as well. So I never feel like there's a need to feel threatened or limit anyone who wants to add their voices, because it really is limitless. And so I'm just so happy to see that the circle is growing. And it also kind of falls in line with the idea of our longhouse. Haudenosaunee people, we're not using the word Iroquois, hey, anymore. And Haudenosaunee people, the real translation for that is people who build longhouses, or people of the longhouse. And the rafters of the longhouse are constructed such that it does leave room to expand, because you have to expand to grow your community. And so I'm happy to say that this community is growing, and that the rafters will continue to expand. And I'm aware of the Haudenosaunee relationship with this area as well. So I'm really happy to represent myself here, as well as my community. But really, I am just speaking for myself. Let that be known before I get in trouble. But so that's really where I operate from, those kind of places, from our origin stories, and from the idea that a great sense of responsibility as a Haudenosaunee person and a Haudenosaunee writer who has the responsibility to be as authentic as I possibly can, to work with as much integrity as I can in sharing not only the history, but the current history and the visions for the future, the speculative work that's to come, and making place for other writers. So, I mean, it all sounds really grandiose and like blah, 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 but like, it's like really, that's really where I operate from, man. Like, it really is, And again, it's good to be back on the road. Let me just say that. That's been fun. And took the train here from Six Nations, from my home on Six Nations of the Grand River. And I wish you all could come and visit to Six Nations, because we have an amazing powwow. And hopefully by 2023, we'll be back up and running in the powwow again. And you all must come. You all must come to that. That's I think, that's all I have to say for now. Shall I read?
Yes, please do, please.
So I am going to start off our little session here with a couple of poems. And I returned home. I was living 25 years as a guest on Coast Salish territory, aka Victoria, British Columbia. I mean, what a name. Victoria, British Columbia. Colonial much? Oh my gosh. So anyway, and bringing all my Haudenosaunee energy over there, but they let me stay. So for 25 years, which was good. And I even got to be the poet laureate over there for 3 years. And that was fun. I really enjoyed that term. But coming home, I knew right away that I did want to start a publishing house, because I thought, you know what? I think I can do this. And I think that we do need more Indigenous publishers. We need all sorts of Indigenous people in all aspects of that ecosystem of the literature communities, yeah? Agents, editors, promoters, bookstores, all of it. And so I just thought, well, I could do my little part and, cobble together books for people and call myself a publisher. Basically, that's what I'm doing. But for now, so I'm going to try to do my gymnastics with this microphone in this book. And you might hear me turn pages and stuff like that. But I'm going to start with the first book that appears, or the first poem that appears in this collection. And this was the first poem or the first book that I created on the label, almost like an experiment before, publishing someone else, because I thought, well, if I mess it up, I have only myself to answer to. But I'll tell you something about the Ojistoh name. Ojistoh is, of course, a Mohawk word, and it means like a bright, shiny star, almost like a north star. And Ojistoh is also the name of a story written by E. Pauline Johnson. E. Pauline Johnson, you know E. Pauline Johnson, I'm so excited. I could talk all day long about that girl. But she came into her own as a first Mohawk poetess, late 1800s, early 1900s. And whenever I travel to places that have this rich history here, I always think, Pauline she must have been through here before doing her thing, you know, because she traversed the country 19 times in the late 1800s, early 1900s, when it wasn't easy to do that. But she did it, she took to the road. And reciting her own poetry. And she couldn't get published in Canada, so she made actually 3 trips to the UK, and she found publishers over there. And one of the stories that appears in Flint and Feather, if I'm not mistaken, is the story Ojistoh. And Ojistoh is the name of an Indian maiden who gets captured. By this handsome, rival native guy, and she saves herself because she feigns adoration for her captor, and she's telling him, I love you," as he's riding away with her on the back of this guy's horse, and then she takes his knife from his sheath in his belt, and she stabs him, and she gets away, and she runs back home to her man, and that's Ojistoh. So I thought, okay, that's brilliant. I'm going to name the publishing after Ojistoh saving herself. And if maybe this is an overshare, but so for 25, I'm 30 years sober. And for 25 years sober, I got some ink, I got a tattoo. And so this year, it was 30 years sober, and I was going to get some ink, so tattoo in the summer, but I was too busy. And you don't want to do these things when you're busy. You want to be calm. So there's an image on the cover of one of her antique books for Legends of Vancouver, and I'm going to get the image that's on the cover of that book on my arm. So that will be my 30 years. And my dedication to Pauline. Now, where was I? Okay, we're gonna read. So that's the Ojistoh. So that's the story behind Ojistoh Publishing. And I have published one of the authors from Six Nations now, and the book is available across the street at the bookstore. It's called Memory Keeper, and it's a delightful collection of short memoirs. Check it out. Anyway, so I'm going to start with. A poem from this book that I produced in 2019. Listen to each other breathe. Seasons are treaties, not bad decisions, but agreements negotiated cleverly by old deities when they roamed a very different earth than today. Human energies exist as collective consciousness. Latent awarenesses awaken us, makes change in delicate, deliberate, and very slow motion waves. We've got no reason to complain, except for the water, except for the weather. When we reach into earth, we have no words to define what we once recognized and had libraries of languages to describe. We stand, closed eyes, listen to each other breathe, work the prayers together. This is unromantic. This is reclamation. Proactivity, go. Pull smoke from the pipe, wash it over, feel the tingle of herbs on the tongue, manifesting peace words. Hold berries between your fingers and remember fun. Love is silly, but we still love. And I'll share one more piece here for you. This is called Soft Earth. Is this earth? It is so soft. I've been living in a steel beam reality, uncomfortable, hot, not air-conditioned where precipitation is discouraged. Touch her. She wants to hold you. Feel her heat surround you. Go ahead and sweat. Why don't you? Cry through words you speak. Go to a place of personal risk. Go and come back. Recognize connection. It will blow you away. Silence inside the vault is sex. It's sexy. museum secrets made public. This is my history. Is this history at all? I am an open-hearted target. I come to them humble, with nothing, take aim, pierce me with teachings, open my thinking, feeling what she felt. I see what she is seeing. I'm speaking about Pauline here, actually. I did not have the chance to dance with him. It was like that for her, too. At least we have memories of so much honesty. Sexy. Identity is partially defined by our finality, part adaptability. Lots of making believe, love making come true. There are many ways, versions of the same. How do I tame knee-jerk critiques, closing the drawers of knowing? Shouldn't the will to welcome be immediate? I like uncertainty. It reminds me of respect. When no one has taught us modesty, the earth is so soft. Come, touch it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Janet. I think round of applause on that. So I want to talk first of all a bit about Ego of a Nation and where it came from. So I managed to bring with me a very early chapbook from Janet Rogers, which is 2003, which you were, I think, quite surprised to see. So it's been a long and very, very fruitful writing career, I think we could say. And one of the things that I found, I think that you described Ego of a Nation was a 57-year-old's collected wisdoms offered back as anti-teachings. And I wondered if you could speak to the wisdoms and the anti-teachings with this.
Yeah, in my birthday is the same day as Oprah Winfrey's, January 29th. So that's coming up. And I'll be 59. Holy shit. And I mean, you know, if you've been paying attention, then yeah, of course you're going to pick up a few teachings along the way. And again, it's that sense of responsibility. It's like, what good are those teachings if you just keep them to yourself? You have to share them around. And I do come across the people, the right people who need the teachings and who are deserving and, you know, who really can benefit from that and whatever that looks like. And I'm sure we all do that in every, you know, in our way. So it's the same with the writing. It's like, that's where I express my life experiences and the things, the little tidbits of wisdom that I've learned along the way. I mean, that's where they end up. They end up in the collections, you know. And again, it's available. You make it available for everybody. It's right there on the shelf. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to talk about someone who we just lost, Lee Miracle, who, you know, I just want to bring her spirit into the room a little bit here, because each and every single writer, native writer, non-native writer, I'm sure can at least name one thing they've learned from Lee Miracle. Like, she was just everyone's matriarch, you know? And there was we didn't expect to lose her so quickly and so soon. So I know I learned a lot from her. One of the teachings being, Lee, what do you think of reconciliation? And here's Lee, we got nothing to reconcile for. She would sit there and just go, we have nothing to reconcile. Yeah. And I'd be like, oh my God, you're so right. Why are we even like bothering talking about this? But she distills the issues down to their essence, and she just lays it on you. And so if I can even do a fraction of what Lee did, you know, in my time as a writer, then I'd be really, really happy. But I'm moving into other areas of practice, such as the media, producing media, sound production. I just won the Best Experimental Sound at Imaginative Film Festival, which I love. Thank you. I love making sound. And the sound and the radio go hand in hand, and the spoken word and the radio go hand in hand. And so everything just seems to be like circles overlapping themselves on each other. And I mean, it's just about doubling down on things you really love to do. Yeah. And I've been, you know, as a single child-free person, I can do that. And not just because of that. I mean, I think there's a lot of people who can juggle all kinds of different aspects of their lives, but I do just want to promote that. how happy I am about being a single child-free person. It rocks, man. It really does. That's I think what I had to say is, and the fact that you've brought this chapbook from, what year did you say that was from?
It's 2003.
2003. Like, I've been cobbling little books together for a long time, man. And it took me a long time to find my first publisher. I thought I had to go the usual route, like sending, cold calling, sending those letters out back, when letters were the thing, and receiving those, because the usual story is you're going to get 1 million rejection letters. That's not necessarily true. And how I found my first publisher was, it was a small publisher who lived in Victoria, British Columbia. And it was someone who I knew, and I went, doing, why am I not asking this person to publish me? And that's all it took. And I had a poetry recording before I even produced, even before I had the book ready, so that when I asked him to publish me, I said, and could we add this? Back then it was a compact disc. It's a round thing, and it's flat, and it's made of aluminum. And so they included it in the back of the book, and so it kind of gave this extra added reason for people to pick up the book, my first book. And that's how that went, So, because, you have so many different practices kind of running simultaneously with, there's the performance poetry, you've just spoken about the archaic form of CDs. Yeah. And what I'm actually going to say is, I was listening to your SoundCloud, you'd sent me over some links coming over, and I very much recommend it, by the way. And what was interesting was there was obviously quite a big gap between some of the earlier works that were posted on there and then your later ones. And there was, I think, there's the longer piece, The Battle Within, that was May of this year. Oh yeah. And it's sound art. There's not a lot of text necessarily involved. Certainly some of your other work, it's vocal work. It's chant. It's howl. It's cry. And then you have your literary works as well. And so I'm wondering. Is there a prompt? What are the different prompts that makes you go down the path of sound art or text or painting? Because this is your own image as well on the front of this. What prompts you to go down the different practices? I really love to read my own work, and there's no elbow, everyone. Everyone stand. Just kidding. Just kidding. It's. If you're wondering, here's a common question I get as a spoken word artist. People will ask, well, how do you know which pieces of yours, to develop further into a spoken word? And I say, well, read your pieces out loud, and the pieces themselves are going to let you know. The pieces that you read more passionately than others, those are the ones that want to live off the page. And you just go at it like that, and it's really trial and error. And because I was working in radio while I was also developing my writing, I was familiar with and had access to a number of the up-and-coming Indigenous musicians and their work. And I could say to Chris Dirksen, write her a little message and say, hey, Chris, can you send over 4 of your tracks? I want to see how they work with, sure. And then then we strike a little deal after when I choose the ones that I think work best, and so on and so forth. So that's how it went for me, how I made the recordings. And then of course I had a lot of luck getting into the Banff Centre for the Arts, which of course I just sing their praises because they're just amazing. We're so fortunate to have the Banff Centre and the facilities there. You learn how to do spoken word by doing it. And what I love about the spoken word practice too is that there's no rigid definitions around what it is. We keep defining it by doing it. It's this, it's that, it's everything, it's all kinds of things, It's fun, and it should be fun. And it's different than slam. I'll just say that. That's one of the parameters I put around that. It's like slam is different than spoken word. It's a different thing. But there wasn't a lot of Indigenous people doing spoken word. When I was coming up, I would ask around. He's like, who else is doing this out there? And people would give me names of rappers. I went, that's not the same at all. So anyway, just, seeing that community grow as well. And it really is, like when I speak of Pauline Johnson, I always say that she was the first spoken word artist, man, because she was out there reciting her stuff like in this kind of theatrical manner, but it was recitation. It was spoken word, And so the work that I do as a spoken word artist, I often understand that I'm continuing the work that she started. And so again, that's another thing that kind of keeps me grounded in what I'm doing. Like, if after this many years, if you might get into a position where you're just going, why am I doing this? Why do I keep doing this? What is this about? Well, I've got these touchstones that I can, bring me back into my own and keep me grounded. But again, keeping the practice, expanding the practices too, never limiting where I understand poetry can live. Poetry can live in the theater. Poetry can live in a movie. Poetry can live in a performance in a swimming pool. It can live absolutely anywhere and everywhere. There is no need to limit that. And I just really get excited about that. So the recording was part of that. It made me excited, and then to add the sounds and the music too. And part of that was about collaborating, learning about collaboration. And collaboration, here's a little pearl for you. I always say that collaboration is the new grant. There's lots of grants. I talk a lot of shit about Canada, but we have a lot of grants. So but even failing that, think about collaborating. Because when you collaborate, you are working with someone who is bringing their whole wheelhouse of resources and knowledge with them as well. And then when you do produce your work, you are also relying on their collaborator to help in the promotion, and they have a whole other audience of people that to share work with as well. So I just love collaborating, and I've been doing a lot more of it. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. No, it's evident in the soundtracks, and as I say, do look them up. They're amazing. I wanted to unpick this idea of the difference between the texts that are written and the performed text. There's the recorded text and also live to an audience. And going back to this idea of, anti-teachings, is there a difference for you in thinking, okay, this is something that's going to be read on the page by somebody processing, or this is going to be something that's heard perhaps collectively? Does that affect it?
There was the most recent video poem I did is called Monologue Harmonic, and it's on the Vimeo. And the poem comes first. Okay, here we go. The poem comes first, and then the recording comes next, and then the finding or the producing of the music then comes next, and then the visuals come next. And then the grant comes next. and then just finding your team comes next. And then I'll mention this name again, the Monologue Harmonics. It's received 5 screenings so far. I had a conversation with who I collaborated with on this piece, Monologue Harmonic, and they're the Bowadan Collective, and they're based out of Hamilton, Ontario. Ojibwe, they're Anishinaabe film collective, and we had a conversation in May of this year about working together, and by July we had the piece done, and it was whirlwind. So that's when you find the right people to work with. Like that's how accelerated that process can be, and I started with the poem. I said, "What do you think we could do with this?" And I showed the poem. And then I recorded, and then I put the music, and then they took it to the visuals, and then they did the editing and things like that. So, yeah, I hope people try it. It's yeah.
Yeah. As I say, go and look it up.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you about your most recent recorded piece as well, because we talked about it briefly before, which was Perpetuations. Which you recorded in September of this year and is explicitly written as a response to the discoveries at the residential schools. And you said that somebody told you to do it, and I wondered if you could tell us that story.
Yeah. When something like this is happening in, like, I guess they use that term, real time, when we're discovering the bodies of our murdered babies and children at the Indian residential schools, it's like, how do you even process that? What do you do with that information? And I didn't even want to touch it. Like, I didn't want to approach that. But then I was speaking to an artist friend of mine on the West Coast, Lawrence Kwahiatonhk, troublemaker extraordinaire. And he told me in no uncertain terms, he goes, that's what we're here for. That's what we have to do. You have to lean into that. And I was like fucking devastated, and I just thought, and I didn't want to appear exploitive with the subject, because I have a feeling that there's an issue like this big, is it has potential to be exploited in a bad way, and I didn't want to make it look like that. My own sister was murdered in 2013, and I haven't written about it. But there sure is a whole lot of other people that want to write about missing and murdered Indigenous women, who may or may not have that relationship with that issue. So I didn't want to look like that. But having heard from this senior artist, visual artist, tell me, like really I got told, get to it, that's what you're here to do, I went ahead and I wrote that piece. And it did help me to process. It did help me to express some of the political things I needed to say and some of the cultural things I needed to say, and just get that angst out. And I didn't. It's not published. I did record it, but I didn't. It wasn't sent around like extensively. It's just there. It's just there.
It exists.
It does. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you for that story. I wanted to talk about your homecoming back to the Six Nations of the Grand River after your 25 years on Coast Salish territory. Tell us about the homecoming and perhaps what's been left behind on the other side of the coast as well.
Well, I vibrate like a Haudenosaunee person. Like, there's no doubt about it. It's like, dial it down. Sometimes you got to dial it down. But the West Coast was very good to me. I learned how to be a writer. I became a writer on the West Coast. The words were waiting for me there. I never had a dream or a notion to be a writer until I had moved there. And it was 2 years after I was living there that I started to write. And I started writing, going to this open mic at the James Bay Inn in Victoria, BC. And this was a place that used to be a convalescent home, and where Emily Carr actually passed away, the artist. You may have heard of her. And they had an open mic there every Sunday, and I learned how to be a writer at this open mic. And I learned how I didn't want to sound as a writer at this open mic too, do you know what I mean? And but that was a really good training ground, and I heard other spoken word artists perform at that place, and that's where I got the idea. But I was a reluctant spoken word artist because of the memorization. My memory is shit, man, and it was nerve-wracking to do that memory work, and I have many times failed on stage as a spoken word artist, like where the words just leave you and you're stuck there. Like, deer, in the headlights. But after 25 years, I felt ready to leave. I felt like I had given all I could to that land and the people there, and I was ready to come home. And I didn't know what would happen. I knew I was going to start the publishing house, and I thought, I'll just get an office on Six Nations. But as it turned out, I have like this amazing house. Really landed on my feet coming home. And we were talking, I said, there is such a thing as divine timing. And the ancestors really have opened their arms. It's been raining blessings ever since I got home. And when I mentor, because I mentor often other writers, and I mentor at the Banff Center as well in the storytelling program. And when other Native writers come to me and they go, I want to approach this, or I want to talk about that. And the first thing I say to them, I go, get home. If you're not home already, get home. because everything you need is right there. All the people, all the history, get your feet on that land, renew your relationship with that place. It's all there. It's all inspiration. And often, and I've seen a few people do that. You know, if you need permission, I'm happy to give you permission. Go home, get home. You know, and create a relationship there if you don't have one already. Yeah, and if you need to start looking at Google, look at Google. That's what it's there for. You know. Yeah.
And we were talking about earlier as well, because I'd asked, because obviously with the flooding that's been happening on the West Coast at the minute, and you pointed out something interesting that has been happening at the same time as these floods and maybe attention being diverted to them. I wondered if you wanted to speak to that as well.
Yeah, who's aware of the Wet'suwet'en, the struggles over there? The Wet'suwet'en people, Molly and her sister, I can't remember her sister's name right now, the Wickham sisters. I know them from Victoria because they were attending the University of Victoria, and those are the two women who are heading up that land defense action. And it's really, really sad. On the train ride over on Thursday, I was keeping tabs the whole train ride while I was preparing to be here. And then it was like, it was on. It's like the RCMP are raiding. They're making arrests. Here's what's happening. And I'm thinking, how freaking dare they when there's the province is in a state of an emergency, and this is what they're turning their attentions to? Like, I just thought it was such an insult. And of course an insult because they have no jurisdiction on Wet'suwet'en land. So the whole thing is really, really messed up, and it's about, resources, which of course we always have to fight to keep the greedy hands of developers away. And in our territory as well, we have the land back action taking place right now, and it's just encroachment. Like, we see it; they just cannot stay away from our land, man. And it's like all we're asking is that we can retain our own land without even having to develop it. It's like we don't even want a development. We just want to have it and leave it be. Is that okay? So there's all of that. And what I want to say about land is that I came up with this kind of slogan when I was at doing the writer-in-residence at University of Alberta. I said, all stories come from the land. No, hang on, let me get the saying right. Let me not fuck it up here. All stories come from the land, and all land is Indigenous land. Boom, there it is. Write it down.
I think we'll have that in a t-shirt soon. Yes, please.
There's a little teaching.
No, thank you for saying that. So get in the socials and have a look at Wet'suwet'en again, because it's back on, and they're taking advantage of the fact that people are looking somewhere else, we suspect. I'm going to ask you, I have another couple of questions for you. I really would like to hear you read the poem to the Dublin taxi driver. And I want to hear the story about the poem to the Dublin taxi driver. And then I have another question, and then I'll go to the audience. So if anyone has anything for Janet, we'll come to you in just a minute. But please tell me about the Dublin taxi driver.
2018, I was invited to go to Dublin, Ireland, and with a number of writers from North America and from Turtle Island. And I had no, interest to go to Dublin, Ireland, except that, I got this invitation. And I had an amazing experience there. I loved it. And so this is a piece about that, visiting Dublin, Ireland as a Haudenosaunee person. And this is dedicated for Kevin Ross, Dublin taxi driver, because I got this taxi driver like a few times in a row, and he and I kind of struck up a little friendship. So this is for Kevin Ross. The driver is a storyteller, studying myths at the local university. Of course he is, this is Dublin. He tells me all the celebrated saints are men after I tell him our origin story is centered around a woman. Bridget is she who looks after fertility for the people, the one not honored. Perhaps this is the root of the famine. The driver called it genocide, and some say this is contentious. Politics, All the Irish are born into it. Dublin looks like Canada, so he must be Indigenous. Massive rose windows on the face of cathedrals stare back curious at this Canadian, not Canadian, Haudenosaunee visiting. What are you going to do over the UCD? I beg his pardon twice. The love of building monuments to themselves comes from here, brought over and planted like flags on our lands, as if we needed more of them to show up in stone. Do not mourn the statues as they drop in succession. There are plenty more littering the world as we speak, recycled stone of their ancestors, and so it goes. Mohawk, he asks. I say yes. He tells of the time when Choctaw sent food to the starving, knowing as compassion, genocide is the link. 9 giant-sized silver feathers erected circular in Cork, landmark to kindness called kindred spirits. More story, he tells me. It's Moses' basket that keeps replaying in modern day. Tragedies for hope's sake. We keep hearing of the baby thrown from the window. Laws of gravity say this is impossible. Where do we draw the line? Heartstrings and newspapers. In Dublin, I experienced no culture shock. Touring origins of continental colonialism. Asylum seekers bringing all the furniture and fixtures, brutal memories, advanced historical reenactments. The lies are in the retelling and gaps where story stops.
Thank you for that. Does Kevin Ross, I think you could run applause.
Kevin Ross taxi driver.
Does Kevin Ross know you wrote him a poem?
I don't think he does.
Okay, this is going out on Facebook Live, so if anybody out there knows Kevin Ross, the Dublin taxi driver, he's got a poem about him. We'll send it over.
I would love
Somebody
it.
will know him.
Yeah.
Just to bring a full circle back to that, the first time I heard the story of the sending the food over for the famine was from Lee Maracle. She's still floating about. And believe it or not, I was doing a balado for Kwahiatonhk last year with her, and I was sitting in my parents' house in Northern Ireland while she was somewhere in the West Coast, and we were trying to record this podcast interview between the two of us. And she had a lot to say about the links between Ireland and Indigenous there. So there you go. Cool. There's just to bring things full circle as well. Does anyone have any questions for Janet at this point?
Do we need the microphone for questions? We have a reaching microphone. So there, darling.
You can project. Andre.
I would love to sing. I really am a wannabe singer. I really am. I have not been able to make that jump from poet to songwriter. I would love that. It's a dream. It is a dream. I would love to sing. Yeah.
Can I recommend you to get together in that case?
Okay.
Yeah.
I would love to, yes.
This is André Lévesque-Sioui, for anyone who doesn't know, who's a fabulous
I sing
singer.
on the big drum, I sing on the big drum, yeah. But it's hard to find a co-ed big drum because it's always so the men are always around the drum and they don't let the women sit. But in Victoria, we had a co-ed drum, and I miss that drum so much. It was great to sing on that drum. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Oh, I'm happy to talk about that. And I like it when people call it's red erotic, like you said, red erotic. And so in 2010, I just took it upon myself to publish my own collection of erotica poetry because when I was creating other collections of my poetry, I noticed that I had these erotica poems, and they didn't really quite fit in to the other collections. And I thought, well, why not give them a space for themselves? And then I couldn't imagine going around trying to sell this collection to a publisher. I thought, screw that, who has time? So I just went and did it and created the collection myself. And it was, a bit of an investment, money-wise. But I tell you, it's in its 4th printing. And I remember the very first time when I had that published, when I had the Red Erotic collection published, like it really goes for it, eh? And it's lots of fun. It's a fun collection, as erotica should be. You know, it should be like a wink and a smile kind of thing, and you know, just have fun with it. And so I brought it to Trent University in Peterborough, and at a writers' gathering, Native writers' gathering, and there was like the front row was all these Native women elders, and I thought, well, here we go. I'm gonna see what happens here, and I let loose with that first poem, and it's a doozy, and I finished the poem, and I looked over to this group of women, and they were like, and they were laughing, and I thought, oh, thank God, like that was a real make or break moment, you know. And then, interesting enough, at that gathering, then it inspired the other Native writers to bring out their erotica work. So everybody seemed to have like, you know, piles or pockets of erotica that, and it's like, the reason why I put that collection together again was because it's like, it's really resistant against residential school shaming and all of the dysfunction within Indigenous sexuality and sensuality. And I mean, I had it back in the day, I had an amazing sex life, like wonderful. and it was just that's what those poems were about. It's like celebrating and just, you know, really enjoying yourself. And I thought, if I can enjoy it, I want other people to enjoy themselves as well. And so it was about giving others permission if they needed it. And it wasn't about jamming it down someone's, you know, psyche. I did get shit from this woman from my community, and she wasn't ready, and I get that. And I told her that. I said, this, you know, this is clearly not for you. And she said, oh, I'm not into all those dildos and things. And I said, there's no dildos in my book. You can just, you know, don't worry about that. And and I said, did you have a look through it? She goes, oh, no. So she, you know, and I get that. And, you know, I just tell that story because it's funny, but I don't shame her. Like, I'm not shaming her, you know. Yeah, it's just whatever's.
I'm just wondering, can you get like a no dildo sticker on the front of it?
I should get a no dildo.
Have to open it.
Well, it might hinder sales if I put no dildo. You know, maybe people
possibly
want the
no
dildo.
dildos. That's a really great question. I've just read in the English translation Virginia Bourdelot's *The Lovers in the Lake*, which is, have you read it en français? Oui, and it's so beautiful. Sexy as all hell. But I thought her framing as well with the introduction was really interesting because she talks about wanting to remove that shame. She deliberately sets it in a period before the residential schools in the 60s scoops so that there is still a chance for it to situate it in before that consciousness became part of the literary consciousness. And it's a real activation of joy. It's a real resistance of joy that she's looking for in it, which I thought was very beautiful.
It's lovely. There's some women in Ontario who've been putting, and they started in Alberta actually, who put together the Teepee Confessions. And it's a showcase, cabaret if you will, where they have an open call. And you can do performance or reading or whatever you do that speaks to Indigenous erotica. And it's really, really fun. Really fun. Yeah. And again, it just encourages others to, you know, it's about sex positivity. You know, it's not about, it's not about a lot of things, but it's about a lot of good things. Yeah.
Great question. Yeah. We have time, I think, for one more question from the audience, if there's anything else. And if not, I'm going to bring it to a close. So just before I ask you to read one more poem to bring it to a close, the bookshop next door in the Moran Centre is apparently closed for the day, but will be open for tomorrow. They've been selling out of lots of books, so if you're hoping to go and get something, I'd go and get it quickly, is all I can say. Let's clear the shelves. That would be amazing. Just empty the whole thing by the end of tomorrow. I think that would be fantastic. And also, we'll be back in here tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock for a round table with Janet, with Daryl J. McLeod, and with Natasha Canapé-Fontaine, talking about literature, healing, and reconciliation, and all the issues within campaign. It's an incredibly interesting mix of panelists for that. I think it's an interesting mix of experiences and practices, and I'm really looking forward to that conversation. So please come back and join us tomorrow morning at 10, if you can. Thank you very much for being here. Thank you to the audience on Facebook. Janet, thank you so much for sharing. And to close us off, please, another poem.
Thank you for hosting, Rachel. Thank you for coming in to do this. Totem Poles and Railroads by ARP Press. Dakota Dreaming. This was, again, lots of traveling, and I get really inspired by lots of traveling, and this is for visiting as a guest on in the Twin Cities, Minneapolis and St. Paul's. Where sky is king, where clouds rule, where rain waves a wet scepter over the city, where airplanes are set free, where the mighty Mississippi married Anishinaabe, where the sun shows all, where light and dark concede in a draw, where sister spirits speak up, break down, peer around pillars, where we remember to ask permission, where we commit acts of protocol, where little earth and aim laid claim, where snows found nowhere to land, so they just kept falling, where flower has two meanings, where train and tracks seldom stop, where old and new come together, making a culture called hipster, where land is lost to valleys and lakes, where fish defend their right to swim, where church bells peal and fade, and wake the dead, where tired comes to rest, where the mason's methods are built in brick. This is where soft fawn-skinned women touch toe to earth, where they lay, where they pray, where Eastern energy is everywhere, where silence says, give it a try, where demolitions produce beauteous ruins, where babies lay sleeping in cumulus beauty. This is where headwaters pour generous, where righteous Indigenous made handshake agreements, where Scandinavian names remain, where twins divide rather than bind, where black star blankets, river locks, and tater tots. Here, a recipe was born at 4 in the morn. The unknown bring visions, tug at bed sheets, take shape as felines and family. Dakota people sleeping, blending their dreams with mine. Very powerful land out there. It was really, really inspiring. Thank you. Nyawa.